The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal ocean under the artificial stars of Nexus Prime Station. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose up toward the dome ceiling. Their voices mixed together in dozens of different languages, creating a sound like wind through metal trees. Ambassador Kang Do-hyun sat in the human section with his small team. His dark suit looked simple next to the bright robes and shining armor worn by other species. Next to him, Director Park So-young checked her data pad one more time. Captain Lee Min-ho stood behind them, his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. All three humans had the same calm look on their faces. "The Council will now hear Resolution 847C, announced the mechanical voice that filled the hall. Human quarantine protocols. Chancellor Grymex rose from his throne in the center of the chamber. The Vorthak leader was huge, with gray skin like stone and forearms that moved like they were conducting music. His voice boomed across the hall without any machines to make it louder. "Fellow members of this great council," Grymex began, "we gather today to address a growing threat to galactic peace. The human species has shown time and again that they cannot be trusted with the responsibilities of civilized society." Kang kept his face blank, but Park felt her jaw tighten. They had heard these words before in smaller meetings, but never in front of the full council. "Humans are unpredictable," continued Grymex. "They make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They solve problems with violence when peaceful solutions exist. They create new technologies without thinking about the dangers." A wave of agreement sounds came from many sections of the hall. The bird-like skylons clicked their beaks. The crystal beings called Hartex chimed like broken glass. The slug-like Mordans made wet clapping sounds with their tentacles. Ambassador Korthan of the Zalani stood up next. Unlike Grymex, he was small and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "I have studied human behavior for many cycles," Korthan said. "Their brains work differently than ours. They cannot think in the long term like we do. They act on impulse. This makes them dangerous to themselves and others." More sounds of agreement filled the hall. Kang watched as species after species nodded or made their versions of yes. "Look at their history," Korthan went on. "Wars every few decades. They destroy their own planet's environment. They create weapons that could kill all life on a world. Do we want such beings having access to our core worlds? Our children?" The Vorthak delegate from the military stood up. "Humans have been involved in 17 conflicts in the past 50 cycles. 17. No other species comes close to this number." Park wanted to stand and explain that most of those conflicts were humans helping other species solve their problems. But she knew it would not matter. The council had already made up its mind. Therefore, Grymex announced, "Resolution 847C calls for the following measures. All humans must leave the core worlds within one cycle. Human ships may not enter core system space without special permits. Humans may not vote on council matters. Human colonies in mixed species systems must be relocated to human-only worlds." The hall erupted in discussion. Some species cheered. Others seemed worried. A few looked uncomfortable with the harsh terms. The aquatic nereids raised their water-filled speaking tube. "This seems very severe," their representative gurgled. "Humans have helped many of our medical facilities. They have also started fights in our spaceports," snapped a Vorthak general. "The Centauri trade routes were much safer after humans began patrolling them," offered a delegate from the insect-like Ketic species, "because they destroyed 12 pirate fleets instead of negotiating with them." Grymex replied coldly. The arguments went back and forth for 2 hours. Kang, Park, and Lee sat through it all without speaking. They listened to species they had helped call them dangerous. They heard allies they had saved describe them as unpredictable. They watched as their medical advances, their engineering projects, and their peacekeeping efforts were twisted into examples of human aggression. Finally, Grymex called for the vote. The great display screens showed the numbers as they came in. Red for yes, blue for no, yellow for abstain. Yes. 23 no. Thor's abstain. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then the cheering began. "The resolution passes," Grymex announced with satisfaction. "Humans have one full cycle to comply with all terms. This council session is now closed." As the noise of celebration filled the air, Kang Do-hyun stood slowly. His movement was so calm and controlled that nearby delegates stopped talking to watch. Park and Lee rose with him, moving like they were part of a ceremony. Kang reached into his jacket and pulled out his diplomatic credentials. The small metal card caught the light as he placed it on the desk in front of him. Park did the same with her trade authority badge. Lee set down his security clearance token. Then Kang turned to face the center of the chamber where Grymex still stood on his platform. The human ambassador bowed deeply, the formal bow of his ancestors that showed respect even in the face of insult. "Chancellor Grymex," Kang said. His voice was not loud, but somehow it carried through the vast hall. "The Galactic Council has made its choice. Humanity will respect this decision completely." The way he said the word completely made something cold move through the chamber. Several delegates stopped celebrating and looked at the human ambassador with sudden worry. "We thank the Council for making its position so clear," Kang continued. "There will be no confusion about where humanity stands in galactic society. We understand perfectly." With that, the three humans turned and walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet hall. They did not look back. They did not make angry speeches or threats. They simply left. As the great doors closed behind them, Corthan felt a strange chill. "Why do I feel like we just made a terrible mistake?" he whispered to his aide. "Don't be foolish," Grymex rumbled from his platform. "Look how easily they accepted defeat. This proves we were right about them. They have no real strength, only bluster." But as the celebration resumed, many delegates could not shake the feeling that the human ambassador's final words meant something more than simple acceptance. The way he had said completely seemed less like surrender and more like a promise. In the corridor outside, the three humans walked in silence toward their shuttle. Park finally spoke as they reached the docking bay. "So it begins," she said quietly. "Yes," Kang replied. "Send the message to Earth. Use Protocol 7. Lee nodded. Protocol 7 was the code they had hoped never to use. The code that meant humanity was no longer welcome in galactic society and must act accordingly. As their shuttle pulled away from Nexus Prime Station, none of the three humans looked back at the great structure that had been the center of their diplomatic lives. They had more important things to do now. The Galactic Council had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. The message reached Earth 18 hours after the Galactic Council vote. Governor Kim Woo-sung read it 3 times in his office overlooking the rebuilt city of Seoul. The cherry trees outside his window were blooming, their pink flowers bright against the spring sky. It seemed wrong that such beautiful things could exist on a day like this. Protocol 7 confirmed, he said into his communication device. Around the Earth, around every human colony, the same message was being sent to every human leader, every human captain, every human citizen. The galaxy had spoken. Humanity was not welcome. On the mining station orbiting Kepler 442, Dr. Yoon Ha-young finished her shift at the medical center. She had been treating a Hartech patient with a rare crystal disease for 3 months. The treatment was working. The patient would live. She wrote her final report with careful detail, explaining exactly what medicines to use and when to use them. She left detailed instructions for the Skillian doctor who would take over. Then she cleaned her office, packed her personal items, and left her medical license on the desk. The Hartech patient never saw her again. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out in thousands of different ways. Human engineers finished their current projects and submitted perfect final reports before disappearing. Human teachers completed their lesson plans and left detailed notes for replacement instructors. Human traders honored every existing contract but signed no new ones. Chief Choi Jaemin ran the Human Trade Consortium from a massive space station in the Vega system. The station processed goods from 40 different species and employed 12,000 beings of various races. It was one of the most successful trade hubs in the outer systems. 3 days after Protocol 7, Choi began the shutdown. "All current contracts will be honored," he announced to his alien employees. "Your final payments will include 3 months extra salary. Transport will be provided to any destination you choose." A Morden supervisor approached him with waving tentacles. "But sir, we don't understand. Business is good." "Why close?" Choi looked at the being who had worked with him for 8 years. They had shared meals, celebrated holidays together, become friends. "The Galactic Council has made it clear that humans are not wanted in galactic commerce. We are simply complying with their wishes. But the Council only said you couldn't work in core systems. This is outer system territory. The Council said humans were too dangerous and unpredictable for civilized society." Choi replied calmly. "We accept their judgment. It would be irresponsible for us to continue operating anywhere that might affect galactic citizens. Within 2 weeks, the Vega trade station was empty, except for automated systems and a few security robots. A simple message played for anyone who tried to dock. This facility has been permanently closed. Thank you for your business. Admiral Bae Suman commanded the human fleets that patrolled the outer trade routes. Her ships had been fighting pirates and raiders for 15 years, keeping the space lanes safe for merchant vessels from dozens of species. Her fleet had the best success rate against criminal activity in the entire galaxy. She received her orders on a Tuesday morning while her ships were hunting a particularly dangerous group of raiders who had been attacking Skyllian cargo ships. All ships. This is Admiral Bae. Return to base immediately. Operation Sunset is now in effect. Her captains were confused. Admiral, we have the raiders cornered. We can finish this in 6 hours. Negative. Return to base now. The Skylians can handle their own problems from now on. But the Skylians couldn't handle their own problems. They had been depending on human military support for so long that they had let their own naval forces grow weak. 3 days after the human ships disappeared, the raiders destroyed 2 more Skyllian cargo vessels and escaped to open space. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Human doctors vanished from hospitals where they had worked for decades. Alien patients with rare diseases that only humans knew how to treat were left with half-finished treatments and no explanations. Human engineers disappeared from construction sites, leaving behind detailed reports but no people to answer questions when problems arose. Fusion plants that had run perfectly for years began showing stress fractures that only human inspectors had known how to spot. Human researchers stopped publishing papers, stopped attending conferences, stopped sharing their discoveries with galactic science institutions. Labs that had been producing breakthrough discoveries every few months suddenly went quiet. Most unsettling of all was the communication silence. Humans stopped answering messages from alien friends. They stopped participating in galactic news networks. They stopped responding to diplomatic requests. Korthan, the Zilani ambassador who had supported the human quarantine, tried to call his human colleague Dr. Han Yunji. They had worked together on agricultural projects for 7 years. She had helped save his homeworld from a crop disease. The message he received was polite but cold. This communication address is no longer in service. Please direct all inquiries to the Galactic Council, which has the authority to speak for all galactic citizens. On Nexus Prime Station, the effects were noticed quickly. The human sections of the station were abandoned overnight. Shops that had been run by human families for generations stood empty. The Great Library's human history section was cleared out, leaving blank shelves where thousands of books had been. The station's air filtration system began having problems. It had been designed by a human engineer who had insisted on backup systems that the other species thought were unnecessary. When the main filters failed, the backup systems were too complicated for the remaining engineers to understand. The diplomatic quarter became strangely quiet. Human ambassadors had always been the most active participants in informal discussions between species. Without them, many delicate negotiations simply stopped happening. Chancellor Grymex noticed none of this. He was too busy celebrating his victory over the human problem. See how quickly they gave up? He told his advisors. This proves they never really cared about being part of galactic society. They were just using us for their own benefit. His military advisor, General Krathmore, was less certain. Sir, our intelligence reports show that human colonies are not breaking apart. They seem to be organizing more efficiently than ever. Organizing for what? They have no enemies now that they are isolated. That's what concerns me, sir. But Grymex waved away such worries. The humans were gone. The galaxy was safer without their unpredictable ways and violent solutions. On Earth, Governor Kim Woo-sung stood in the same office where he had received Protocol 7 6 months ago. The cherry trees outside were bare now, their branches dark against the winter sky. Status report, he said to his assembled cabinet. All humans have been withdrawn from mixed-species territories, reported Admiral Song Tai-yang, the new head of Human Space Command. 0 remaining in core systems, outer stations, or shared colonies. Economic transition is 97% complete, added Finance Minister Park Jin-ho. All galactic currency has been converted. All joint ventures have been dissolved. All trade agreements have been terminated. Communication blackout is total, confirmed Director Nam Ji-woo from Intelligence. No human is responding to any galactic communication attempt. The automated systems are working perfectly, Kim nodded. And our internal preparations? Ahead of schedule, Song replied. The new shipyards are producing faster than projected. Research and development has accelerated without galactic restrictions. Colony infrastructure is expanding rapidly. Morale, higher than ever. Nothing unifies people like being told they are not wanted. Kim looked out at the winter sky. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was congratulating itself on solving the human problem. They had no idea what they had actually done. Continue all operations, he ordered. Maintain complete silence. Let the galaxy see what they chose. The meeting ended and the ministers filed out. Kim remained at his window, watching snowflakes fall on the city below. His people had been insulted, rejected, and cast out. But they had not been defeated. The galaxy wanted to see what civilization looked like without humans. They would get their wish completely. Dr. Vex Thor had been the head of medical research at Altair Central Hospital for 23 years. His blue-scaled hands had saved thousands of lives, and his 4 eyes had seen every kind of medical emergency possible. But he had never seen anything like the plague spreading through the Vorthak colonies. Show me the progression charts again, he told his assistant. Dr. Neil Inda. The wall display lit up with red infection markers spreading across the map of Vorthak Prime. It started in the industrial district 3 weeks ago, Neil Inda explained. Standard respiratory infection, nothing unusual. But it's not responding to any of our treatments. Vex Thor studied the data with growing concern. What about the Zilani antiviral protocols? No effect. The Scalian treatments also failed. We've tried everything in the Galactic Medical Database. Everything? Vex Thor felt a cold realization forming in his mind. What about the human protocols? Nilinda looked uncomfortable. Sir, the humans have been gone for 3 years. Their medical data was removed from the Galactic Network when they left. But surely we kept copies. The Galactic Council ordered all human research to be archived as unreliable and potentially dangerous. Access requires special permits that take months to obtain. Vex Thor slammed his fist on the desk. 3 years ago, he had worked closely with human doctors on respiratory diseases. Dr. Kim Na-young had insisted on extreme hygiene protocols that seemed excessive at the time. She had also developed a treatment specifically for the type of infection now spreading through Vorthak Prime. Get me those permits, he ordered, however long it takes. But by the time the permits came through, the plague had killed 12,000 Vorthaks and was spreading to other species. On the crystal world of Harteos, engineer Zixani stood before the ruins of the Great Bridge. The magnificent structure had connected the 2 main continents for over 2 centuries. Now it lay at the bottom of the acid seas, its crystal supports shattered. I don't understand, Zixani told the investigation committee. The bridge was inspected just last month. Everything appeared normal. Committee leader Plextar chimed in frustration. Normal according to current inspection methods, but I have been reviewing the old records. The humans who helped build this bridge left detailed warnings about microfractures in the support crystals. Humans always worried too much about structural details, protested another engineer. Their safety margins were unreasonably high. Those unreasonable safety margins might have prevented this disaster, Plextar replied coldly. The human engineer Dr. Lee Da-yun predicted this exact type of failure in her final report. Zixani felt his crystal core dim with shame. Where is that report now? Gone. Removed from our systems along with all other human engineering data. Council Directive 847C classified their methods as overcomplicated and unsuited to galactic standards. The same scene was playing out across the galaxy. On trade route Epsilon 7, merchant ships had to travel in large convoys because pirate attacks had increased by 400%. The human patrol ships that had kept those lanes safe were gone, and no other species had been willing to take over the dangerous job. Trader Mordek of the Ferengi-like Yeltans had lost 3 cargo ships in 2 months. He sat in his office on Commerce Station Beta, staring at his falling profit margins. It's not just the pirates, he explained to his business partner. The entire trade network is falling apart. Shipping schedules are chaotic. Quality control has collapsed. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. His partner Velkoth looked equally worried. I heard that the human-designed shipping management system has been replaced with 17 different programs that don't talk to each other because the council said the human system was too centralized and potentially vulnerable to abuse, Mordek said bitterly. Now we have chaos instead of efficiency. At least we still have our health, Velkoth tried to joke, do we? My nephew on Vorthak Prime is sick with some plague they can't cure, and my sister on Hardos says their water purification plants are failing because they don't know how to maintain the human-designed filters. The problems kept multiplying. On the Zilani homeworld, Ambassador Korthan was discovering that their agricultural miracle had depended entirely on human expertise. The soil management techniques that had tripled, their crop yields were failing. Without human agricultural scientists to adjust the treatments each season, the plants are dying, reported Agricultural Minister Tyandal. The soil chemistry is wrong, but we don't know how to fix it. Korthan felt sick. He had supported the human quarantine because he believed aliens were smarter than humans. Now his people were facing starvation because they had driven away the species that knew how to feed them. What about our own agricultural experts? They specialized in theory, not practice. The humans were the ones who got their hands dirty, who actually understood how plants grow in real soil, instead of laboratory conditions. The worst realization came when Korthan tried to access the human agricultural database. Like all human knowledge, it had been removed from galactic networks and classified as potentially dangerous. On Nexus Prime Station, Chancellor Grymex was beginning to feel less confident about his victory over the humans. His advisors brought him reports of problems from across the galaxy, but he refused to connect them to the human departure. These are just minor technical difficulties, he insisted, growing pains as we adjust to a more stable galactic society. General Krathmore disagreed. Sir, we're seeing system failures in sectors where humans worked for decades. Their absence is creating serious vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities? We're stronger without their chaotic influence, are we? Our early warning sensor network has 17 dead zones where human-operated stations went offline. Our anti-piracy patrols have been cut by 60%. Our medical response to biological threats has been crippled. Grimex's forearms waved dismissively. You worry too much, General. What possible threat could exploit these minor gaps in coverage? Krathmore wanted to answer that question, but he didn't have enough data. The humans had maintained most of the galactic intelligence networks. Without them, the Council was flying blind through space that suddenly seemed much larger and more dangerous. The final wake-up call came when the Dorthan plague reached the core worlds. It was the same disease that had started on Vorthak Prime, now mutated and spreading faster than ever. Within days, it jumped from Vorthax to Zelanis to Skylons to Hartex. Dr. Vexthor finally received access to the human medical archives, but it was too late. Dr. Kim Na-young's protocols could have stopped the plague in its early stages. Now it would require treatments that no one alive knew how to implement. We need to contact the humans, Vexthor told the medical council. They're the only ones who understand this type of disease. Impossible, replied council leader Hextara. Humans are under strict quarantine. They chose to isolate themselves from galactic society. We chose to isolate them, Vexthor corrected angrily. And now beings are dying because of our arrogance. The humans showed their true nature by abandoning us so completely. If they truly cared about galactic welfare, they would have offered to help despite the quarantine. Vexthor stared at her in amazement. We threw them out of the galaxy and called them dangerous monsters. Now you're upset that they didn't beg to come back and save us? But the medical council, like most galactic institutions, was not ready to admit their mistake. The humans were still the problem. Somehow. On Earth, Governor Kim Woo-sung read the intelligence reports with no satisfaction. Millions of beings were suffering because the galactic leadership had been too proud and prejudiced to appreciate human contributions. Should we offer assistance? Asked his medical advisor, Dr. Choi Min-seo. To whom? Kim replied sadly. The Galactic Council that called us too dangerous for civilized society? The species that cheered when we were exiled? The leaders who ordered all human knowledge removed from their systems because it was potentially harmful? But innocent people are dying. Yes, and their leaders know exactly where to find the help they need. They know how to contact us if they choose to. Kim turned back to his reports. The galaxy was learning what they had rejected. The question was whether they were humble enough to admit their mistake, or too proud to ask for help from the humans they had cast out. Time would tell which path they would choose. The first sign of the Devourer swarm came from the Outer Rim Sensor Station on Kepler 438b. Technical Specialist Krikstal was monitoring the deep space arrays when she noticed, something strange on her displays. Supervisor, she called to her Zilani boss. I'm detecting massive energy signatures in the void zone. Multiple contacts, very large. Supervisor Yelmdar floated over to her station, his tentacles moving in patterns that showed mild concern. How large? Each signature is the size of a battleship, but there are hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. That's impossible. Nothing that big exists in the void zone. It's empty space. Krikstal checked her instruments again. The readings were getting stronger. Sir, whatever these things are, they're heading toward galactic space fast. Within hours, the reports were flooding in from observation posts across the rim. Something massive was emerging from the dark space between galaxies. Something that had been traveling for millions of years through the empty void. General Krathmore stood in the command center on Nexus Prime Station, staring at the tactical display with growing horror. The objects were clearly artificial and moving with obvious intelligence. They were also bigger than anything in the Galactic Military Database. What are we looking at? Demanded Chancellor Grymex, who had been called from his sleep. Unknown hostile force, Krathmore replied grimly. Estimated 12,000 individual units, each massing between 500,000 and 2 million tons. They're heading directly for our outer colonies. Who are they? What do they want? We don't know. Our communication attempts have been ignored, but their trajectory suggests hostile intent. The first attack came at dawn on Proxima Station. The mining colony had 18,000 inhabitants and a small defense force. The attacking machines arrived without warning and moved with terrifying efficiency. Station Commander Bixler sent a desperate message as his defenses crumbled. They're not ships. They're some kind of mechanical beings. Our weapons aren't working. They're eating the station. They're actually eating it. The transmission cut off after 17 minutes. When the Galactic Relief Force arrived 6 hours later, they found empty space where Proxima Station had been. Every trace of the colony was gone, consumed down to the last metal bolt. The things that had destroyed it were already moving toward the next target. Devourer machines, whispered Dr. Yiltea, the galaxy's leading expert on ancient technology. She stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her scales pale with fear. The old legends were true. They've returned. What legends? Demanded Grymex. Stories from the first galactic civilizations millions of years ago. Machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems to fuel their reproduction. They were supposed to have been destroyed in the Great War. Clearly they weren't destroyed, Krathmore said grimly. They were driven into dark space and now they're back. The next attacks confirmed everyone's worst fears. The Devourer machines adapted to every weapon used against them. Energy beams that destroyed the first wave were useless against the second. Missiles that worked once never worked again. The machines learned from every encounter and evolved their defenses in real time. Captain Zorhan led the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history to defend the Arcturus system. 200 battleships from 15 different species, armed with the most advanced weapons technology could provide. The battle lasted 4 hours. The galactic fleet was completely destroyed. They don't just adapt, Zorhan reported in his final transmission. They predict our tactics before we use them. It's like they know exactly how we think, how we fight. Every standard maneuver fails. Every conventional strategy is useless. The Devourer swarm moved deeper into galactic space, consuming colonies and fleets with mechanical precision. Nothing could slow their advance. Worse, they seemed to be learning about galactic civilization from each victory, becoming more efficient with every battle. On Nexus Prime Station, panic was spreading through the corridors. The great meeting chambers that had once echoed with proud speeches now buzzed with desperate whispers. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were realizing they might be facing extinction. Dr. Yiltea worked frantically in the archives, searching for any information that might help. The ancient records were fragmentary, but one detail kept appearing in the old texts. The first galactic civilizations fought the Devourers for 1,000 years, she reported to the Emergency Council. They only won when they abandoned conventional tactics and started using what the records call chaos patterns. What does that mean? Asked Ambassador Corthan. The records aren't clear, but it seems to refer to unpredictable strategies, random attack patterns, improvised tactics that couldn't be anticipated or adapted to. General Crathmore looked puzzled. That makes no sense. How can random tactics defeat an intelligent enemy? Maybe the Devourers are too intelligent, Yilti suggested. Maybe they can only adapt to logical strategies. Chaos might be something they can't understand or counter. This is madness, Grymex protested. Military victory comes from discipline, planning, and proven tactics. Not from random chaos. But the Devourers were getting closer to the core worlds. Conventional tactics had failed completely. The galactic military was running out of ships, out of ideas, and out of time. That's when someone mentioned the humans. The humans always used unpredictable tactics, whispered a minor delegate from the Chittic species. They never followed standard military doctrine. They improvised solutions that made no logical sense. The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered the human military actions they had criticized as chaotic and irresponsible. Now those same tactics might be the galaxy's only hope. The humans are under quarantine, Grymex said weakly. They chose to isolate themselves. We chose to exile them, Corthan corrected, his voice heavy with regret. We called them dangerous and unpredictable and drove them from the galaxy. They wouldn't help us anyway, insisted Grymex. They showed their true nature by abandoning galactic civilization so completely. But even as he spoke, Grymex knew he was wrong. The reports from the outer colonies told a different story. The humans hadn't abandoned galactic civilization. They had been thrown out of it. Ambassador Velnara of the peaceful aquatic Nereids finally spoke the words everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. We need to ask them for help. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species still insisted that humans were too dangerous to trust. Others argued that the Devourers were a greater threat than human unpredictability. A few delegates quietly suggested that maybe humans weren't as dangerous as they had been told. While the council argued, the Devourer swarm consumed 3 more systems. Each victory made them stronger and more adaptable. Their mechanical intelligence grew more sophisticated with every world they devoured. Finally, even Grymex had to face reality. The galaxy was losing. Conventional defenses were useless. The only hope lay with the species they had rejected and exiled. Send a message to the humans, he ordered reluctantly. Tell them we need their assistance against this threat. What should we offer in return? Asked Velnara. Grymex's forearms sagged with defeat. Whatever they want. The message was sent to the edge of human space through automated relay stations. It was a simple request for military assistance against an unknown enemy that threatened all galactic civilization. The reply came back within hours. It was equally simple. Message received and understood. Humanity is currently observing strict isolation protocols as requested by the Galactic Council. Please direct all inquiries to the appropriate galactic authorities who have jurisdiction over such matters. The humans weren't refusing to help. They were simply following the rules the galaxy had imposed on them. They were staying exactly as isolated as they had been ordered to be. The galaxy had told them they were too dangerous for civilized society. Now the galaxy was facing an enemy that conventional civilization couldn't defeat, and the humans were politely maintaining their distance just as they had been instructed. The message was clear. If the galaxy wanted human help, it would have to officially ask for it. And that would mean admitting that the human quarantine had been a mistake. As the Devourer swarm approached the core worlds, the Galactic Council faced a choice that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. They could maintain their pride and face extinction using conventional tactics, or they could swallow their arrogance and ask the humans to save them. Ambassador. Velnara had never been to Earth. Few aliens had even before the quarantine. As her small diplomatic ship approached the blue-green world, she felt a mixture of hope and shame that made her aquatic breathing difficult. The human orbital defense stations were impressive. Much more impressive than the intelligence reports from 5 years ago had suggested. Sleek warships moved in formations that seemed almost like dances, their hulls gleaming with technology she didn't recognize. Unknown vessel. Please state your business, came the polite but firm communication from traffic control. This is Ambassador Velnara of the Galactic Council, she replied. I request an urgent meeting with human leadership regarding the current galactic emergency. Please stand by. The wait seemed endless. Below, Earth turned slowly, showing continents green with life and cities bright with lights. It looked peaceful, prosperous, completely untouched by the chaos consuming the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Velnara, you are cleared to land at Sol Diplomatic Complex. Please follow the guide beacons. Welcome to Earth. The politeness in the voice made her feel even worse about her mission. President Han Jisu received her in a simple office overlooking a garden where cherry trees were blooming. She was a small woman with kind eyes and silver hair, wearing a plain blue suit that would have looked modest in any galactic diplomatic meeting. Thank you for seeing me, Madam President, Velnara began. I know this request is unusual given the current restrictions between human and galactic territory. There are no restrictions from our side, Han replied gently. We have always welcomed diplomatic contact. Please sit. Would you like some tea? The hospitality made Velnara's shame even deeper. She accepted the tea, noting that it was served in delicate cups that showed the humans hadn't forgotten the arts of civilization despite their isolation. Madam President, I come to ask for humanity's help. The galaxy faces a threat unlike anything we have ever seen. Han listened without interruption as Velnara described the devourer swarm, the failed defenses, the consumed worlds. When the alien ambassador finished, the human president sat quietly for a long moment looking out at the cherry blossoms. This is indeed a serious situation, Han said finally, but I'm confused about why you're bringing this to us. Didn't the Galactic Council determine that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable for galactic society? Velnara felt her gills flutter with distress. That decision may have been made in error. Was made in error, Velnara corrected herself. We were wrong about humanity. We acted from prejudice and fear. Han nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty, Ambassador. But you understand our position. The Galactic Council voted 847 to 23 to quarantine humanity from galactic society. We have been following that directive completely. But surely, given the current crisis doesn't change the fact that we were deemed unsuitable for participation in galactic affairs. Han interrupted gently but firmly. The Council was very clear that human involvement in galactic matters was dangerous and unwelcome. Velnara wanted to argue, but she knew the human president was right. The galaxy had rejected humanity completely. Now they expected humans to ignore that rejection and rush to help their former oppressors. However, Han continued, if the Galactic Council were to formally request human assistance, and if appropriate arrangements were made, humanity would certainly consider helping our galactic neighbors in their time of need. What kind of arrangements? Han smiled, but her eyes remained serious. Full restoration of human rights in galactic society, a formal apology from the Galactic Council for the quarantine, and meaningful reforms to ensure that no species is ever again excluded from galactic civilization based on prejudice. And in exchange, we share our defensive technologies and military expertise. Our fleets will fight alongside galactic forces against this devourer threat. Velnara felt a surge of hope. You have technologies that can fight them? Ambassador, humanity has spent the last 5 years preparing for exactly this type of threat. We never stopped monitoring galactic space. We knew the devourers were coming long before they reached the outer rim. The words hit Velnara like a physical blow. You knew? Our deep space sensors detected them 3 years ago. We've been developing countermeasures ever since. But why didn't you warn us? Han's expression grew sad. Ambassador, we tried to warn the galaxy about many threats over the decades. We were told our warnings were just examples of human paranoia and aggression. When we were exiled, we decided to focus on protecting ourselves. Velnara understood now why the humans had withdrawn so completely. They hadn't abandoned the galaxy out of spite. They had been protecting themselves from threats that the galaxy refused to acknowledge. Will the Council accept these terms? Han asked. I believe they will, Velnara replied. They're desperate. Desperation isn't enough, Han said firmly. We need genuine acknowledgement of past wrongs and commitment to future change. Humanity won't be second-class citizens in the galaxy we help save. The negotiations took 3 days. The Galactic Council, with devourer forces approaching the core worlds, had little choice but to accept human demands. Chancellor Grymex was forced to resign in disgrace. The new emergency leadership formally apologized to humanity and repealed all quarantine measures. Admiral Song Taiyang arrived at Nexus Prime Station with a fleet that amazed the galactic observers. Human ships were sleeker, faster, and more heavily armed than anything in the galactic database. More importantly, they moved with tactical flexibility that seemed almost artistic. "Your orders, Admiral?" asked General Krathmore, who had been placed under human command for the duration of the crisis. "We fight like humans," Song replied with a slight smile. "Chaotically." The first joint engagement took place in the Deneb system. The Devourer machines arrived expecting another easy victory against predictable galactic tactics. Instead, they found human ships performing maneuvers that made no strategic sense. Human fighters broke formation randomly, attacked from impossible angles, and withdrew at seemingly arbitrary moments. Human capital ships fired in patterns that appeared chaotic but somehow coordinated perfectly. The Devourer's adaptive algorithms couldn't process tactics that had no logical structure. "How do they do that?" wondered Captain Zorhan, now serving as Song's liaison officer. "Human military doctrine is based on controlled chaos," Song explained as his ships danced through the enemy formation. "We train our crews to improvise, to make decisions based on instinct rather than rigid procedures. The Devourers can adapt to logic, but they can't adapt to organized unpredictability." The battle was humanity's first victory against the Devourer swarm. More importantly, it was the galaxy's first victory. Dr. Nam Ji-woo, the human scientist who had developed the anti-Devourer technologies, shared her research with galactic scientists. The weapons were based on principles that conventional galactic science had considered impossible. "Quantum resonance disruption," she explained to Dr. Yiltia. "We discovered that the Devourer machines maintain coherence through quantum entanglement. Disrupt that entanglement and they lose their adaptive abilities. But the energy requirements must be enormous," Yiltea protested. "That's why we developed fusion plasma hybrid reactors, much more efficient than conventional galactic power systems." Yiltea realized that human technology had advanced far beyond galactic standards during their isolation. The species they had dismissed as primitive had been innovating at a rate that left the rest of the galaxy behind. The final battle took place in Earth's solar system. The Devourer swarm, desperate to eliminate the source of the chaotic tactics that were defeating them, launched a massive assault on humanity's homeworld. They found Earth defended by the most sophisticated military force the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships moved like schools of fish, impossible to predict but perfectly coordinated. Their weapons fired in random patterns that somehow always hit their targets. President Han Jisoo watched the battle from her office, now expanded to include representatives from every galactic species. Chancellor Grimex, stripped of his position but present as an observer, stared in amazement at the displays. "I don't understand," he whispered. "How can chaos defeat order?" "Because it's not really chaos," replied Ambassador Corthan, who had become one of humanity's strongest supporters. "It's a different kind of order, one based on flexibility and adaptation instead of rigid structure." The Devourer machines, faced with an enemy they couldn't understand or adapt to, began to falter. Their perfect coordination broke down when they couldn't predict human actions. Their adaptive algorithms overloaded trying to process tactical patterns that had no mathematical logic and moral. Song delivered the killing blow with a maneuver that would have gotten him court-martialed in any conventional military. He ordered his entire fleet to scatter randomly, then regroup at coordinates chosen by rolling dice. The Devourers, expecting some complex tactical reasoning behind the movement, couldn't adapt to pure randomness. The last Devourer machine was destroyed as the sun set over Sol. The galaxy was safe, saved by the species they had rejected and exiled. In the aftermath, as galactic leaders prepared their formal statements of gratitude, President Han held a quiet ceremony in her garden. The same cherry trees that had been blooming when Velnara arrived